On the ridge above the valley there stood a yew older than any oath spoken in that place. Its roots did not merely bite the earth, they searched. They slid between stones like fingers into old pockets, into buried ash, into bones turned clean by time. Its crown rose into wind, who had carried 1,000 tongues, 1,000 prayers, 1,000 wars and weddings, all of them long gone, yet none gone at all. Beneath that yew lived a man who began to speak of himself as if he were a finished thing. "I am of my father's line," he would say, "of my hall, of my village. I know where I belong." And he began to prune his story the way a careless hand prunes a living tree, not to shape it, but to reduce it. He kept the names that pleased him. He kept the tales that made his blood feel clean and simple. He kept the faith of one forebear and mocked the prayers of another. He spoke of foreign wisdom as if it were poison by nature, forgetting that poison and medicine often wear the same face until tested. One dusk, when the sky had the color of old iron, the man climbed the ridge and stood before the yew. Its bark was scarred with centuries of lightning wounds healed over, knife marks swallowed by growth, and the long record of endurance. In the hollow of its trunk was a darkness deeper than shadow, and in that hollow something glimmered, a loose tangle of threads caught there, as if the tree had been saving them. The man reached in and drew them out. At first he frowned. Some threads were pale as flax, some were dark as peat, some smelled of smoke, some of salt, some of sweet sap. Some were stiff with frost, others softened, as if by sun and long summer rain. He found strands braided with prayers he did not recognize, and cords knotted in ways his own people never tied. He almost threw them down. "This is not mine," he muttered. "This is Utman, foreign." But when his fingers tightened, the threads pulled back, as if they were attached to something living. A sound rose in the hollow yew, not a voice, not words, but the feeling of weight traveling through a line, like a bowstring that cannot lie about its tension. And the man saw, without dreaming, without trance, how the threads ran. One strand led to a woman who had crossed a river in spring thaw, carrying a child and a cooking stone, her feet bleeding into the mud. Another ran to a man who had learned his first laws from an elder whose prayers were not of his own, yet whose wisdom kept the hall from splitting. Another ran to a famine season, when a stranger's method of drying grain saved a whole line from ending. Another to a marriage that joined two clashing clans so children would not be raised under spear shadow. Another to a far coast where salt and wind shaped a kind of stubborn patience that later hardened into courage in the cold. He saw faiths too, old, new, mingled, abandoned, returned to, each leaving marks the way weather leaves marks on wood. Not every mark was holy, not every ancestor was wise. Some were cruel, some were weak, some broke what they should have carried. Yet those failures were threads, warnings woven in so the pattern could learn. The man's throat tightened. He tried to pull one strand free, one that tasted bitter to his pride. The whole bundle strained. The yew groaned, and the man felt it in his bones. You do not cut away what made you without cutting away yourself. He looked up at the yew's crown, rising through the darkness toward the higher air. There in the branches sat a raven and a small winter wren together, two creatures that should have kept distance, watching him with the same bright, unblinking attention, as if the ridge itself were judging whether he would become smaller or deeper. The man lowered the threads gently to the ground. He began to sort them, not by what flattered him, but by what was true. He did not kneel to foreign feet or altars. He did not renounce his own hearth. He simply stopped pretending his hearth had been built from one kind of material. As he laid the strands side by side, he saw something that made his eyes sting. Alone, each thread looked like a contradiction. Together, they were a rope. A rope thick enough to pull a plow. A rope strong enough to hold a roof beam. A rope fit to bridge a river. The yew's shadow lengthened over him, and in it he understood the rune without needing it carved. Uwas is the living vertical, life rising from death, strength rising from what was carried. Not purity as emptiness, not identity as denial, but continuity as discipline. He gathered the bundle to his chest and walked back down the ridge. That winter, when the hall argued, he remembered the thread of the elder who learned from someone not of his blood, and used it to keep the peace. When the harvest threatened to fail, he remembered the stranger's method that once saved his line and did not spit at it because it had come from far away. When the children asked who they were, he told them the whole truth. Not a slogan, not a modern sermon, just the honest map of their making. You are not a single strand, he said. You are a weave. And if you want to carry the ancestors' dreams to Horizon himself, you will not do it by pretending half the loom never existed. So the man became steadier, not softer, not rootless, but truer. He mended where he stood, and the yew kept remembering.